In this world, as long as one knows the structural formula of a material, anything can be created. Fama, in his previous life, was a highly talented medical student, finding chemistry quite effortless. He quickly learned water magic by imagining the structural formula of water in his mind. Then, by visualizing compounds like gold, he obtained a large amount of rare materials. Before his rebirth, Fama was a medical professor who had witnessed his younger sister die of cancer at a young age. This experience determined him to develop a drug that could cure cancer. He lived a life of going back and forth between home and the laboratory, conducting experiments day and night, often staying up until the early hours without rest, only pausing briefly while waiting for experimental results. Fama set his alarm for 46 minutes later, but unexpectedly, when he woke up, he found himself in a completely new world. Confused by the unfamiliar surroundings, Charlotte, who was nearby, hurried over and explained that he had fainted after being struck by lightning. At that moment, seeing the time reminder written on his hand, Fama instantly realized that he must have died from overwork and was reborn in another world. Following Charlotte's explanation, Fama pretended to have amnesia due to the lightning strike and asked Charlotte to help him understand the current situation. Under Charlotte's guidance, Fama learned that his name was Fama. This world was one of medicine and magic, and his father was a court pharmacist with a very distinguished status, having 3 children under his care. His brother was studying abroad at the world's best pharmacy college, and he also had a younger sister living in the same mansion. Charlotte was incredibly excited when it came to divine arts, as Fama was a genius in using water-based divine arts. The next moment, Charlotte worried that Fama might have forgotten this too. Seeing Falma's awkward expression seemed to confirm her fears. Charlotte was terrified because using divine arts was a symbol of nobility. If Fama forgot how to use divine arts, he would lose his noble status and be driven out of his home. Back in his room, Fama recalled Charlotte's words and tried to visualize the appearance of water, not quite understanding what that meant, and then imagined the molecular structure of water, consisting of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Immediately, a pool of water appeared in his hands, which kept growing. Fama panicked as he didn't know how to stop it and quickly went to the window to dispose of the water created by the divine art. Later, Fama experimented with other substances and managed to create gold, sodium chloride, and other compounds, though he couldn't create mixtures. Additionally, Fama discovered that his left hand could create items, while his right hand could eliminate them. Just as he was about to delve deeper, Charlotte knocked and came in. She had already seen Fama using divine arts outside and was very happy. However, she thought of something else. Falma's father liked to quiz him on pharmacology at the dinner table. If Fama, suffering from amnesia, didn't know the answers, he would surely be punished. Hearing this, Fama couldn't help but panic and quickly went to the study to see if he remembered anything, considering he was a medical prodigy in his previous life. Fama flipped through a book and fortunately, the pharmacological knowledge of this body was still intact. He recalled everything upon reading. However, the content in the book was medical knowledge from several centuries ago on Earth. And for him, a modern medical prodigy, this was far too simple. At the dinner table, he fluently answered his father's medical questions. Seeing that Fama seemed unaffected after being struck by lightning, his father let him finish his meal and then sent him to continue his lessons with Teacher Eleanor. Teacher Eleanor, observing the calm boy in front of her, who was completely different from the Fama she knew, couldn't help but feel suspicious. Fama, seeing that he couldn't maintain his guise, confessed that he had been struck by lightning and had lost part of his memory. Hearing this, Eleanor's suspicions were allayed. She asked Fama if he still remembered divine arts. Fama, embarrassed, indicated that he seemed to have forgotten. Thus, Eleanor decided not to discuss pharmacology that day and instead reviewed the basics of divine arts, which consist of the 5 elements: water, fire, wind, earth, and void, each having positive and negative aspects. Fama was puzzled about what the void element was. Eleanor explained that it had not appeared for 300 years and she was not very clear about it, only knowing it was a powerful attribute. Then Fama continued to inquire, asking what attribute it would be if someone could freely create various materials. Eleanor shrugged and said, "How could such an attribute exist? If it really did, the person possessing it would be either a god or a monster." Fama was shocked, realizing the extent of his own abilities. After the basics of divine arts were discussed, Eleanor started practical training with Fama, handing him a wand and asking him to release a water spear to sea. Fama then positioned himself and began to release it, but the next second, a burst of intense energy erupted, startling the teacher and causing Fama, also frightened, to release the wand. Fama's operation terrified Eleanor, not only because the water spear was too powerful, but also because Falma did not need to chant spells. Suddenly, Eleanor thought of something. Each person has a fixed total amount of divine power in their lifetime. If Falma had used up his in that moment, it would be gone. She quickly brought out a divine power meter for Falma to hold. But what Eleanor could not anticipate was that Falma's divine power value had exceeded the limit, and he possessed both positive and negative attributes, shocking her to the point of dropping her glasses. Eleanor rushed forward and tore open Falma's sleeve, discovering glowing sacred marks on his arm. To know that such a pattern indicated the presence of a god of medicine, Falma explained that it was just a scar left from being struck by lightning. Eleanor immediately countered, "Have you ever seen a burned scar emit blue light?" She solemnly told Falma never to hold a divine power meter in front of others. If people discovered he was a god of medicine, it could bring him deadly trouble. After these events, Eleanor had no desire to continue teaching and planned to go home after ending today's lesson. However, without her glasses, she could hardly see the road. Falma quickly went to support her and noticed her hands were trembling, unsure if it was due to fear or excitement. After walking for a while, the two sat down on a bench to rest. Falma told Eleanor that if she didn't have her glasses, she could make a small circle with her fingers in front of her eyes to see clearly. At that moment, Falma also discovered something. When he made a circle with his fingers in front of his eyes, he could see through things. Falma immediately went forward and grabbed Eleanor's middle finger, causing her to cry out in pain. She told Falma that she had accidentally bumped her middle finger that morning, which confirmed Falma's suspicion. A blue light would appear when a problem was detected, and a white light would emit upon diagnosing the cause. He asked Eleanor if this was also a divine art. At this point, Eleanor was immensely shocked, because legend had it that only the god of medicine could diagnose all illnesses and prescribe the right treatment, and Falma's actions resembled exactly that of the god of medicine's divine eye. This series of events baffled Eleanor. Then, she noticed something else. "Falma, why don't you have a shadow?" This completely panicked Eleanor, as all signs pointed to Falma being the god of medicine. In her alarm, she didn't know what to do and ran home. The next day, Falma's father called him over and told him that teacher Eleanor had a fever, had taken leave, and wanted to resign from her tutoring job. He asked Falma if he knew what was going on. Falma, feeling guilty but afraid to reveal the truth, suggested that perhaps the teacher was disheartened because of her fever. His father was greatly disappointed upon hearing this, as Eleanor was his direct disciple and tutoring was part of her training. If she couldn't overcome this minor difficulty, how could she continue to be a pharmacist? So, he prepared a bottle of medicine and a letter for Falma to deliver to Eleanor. Back in his room, Falma checked the medicine's formula and found it was only a nutritional supplement. Wanting Eleanor to recover quickly, Falma made acetaminophen himself. When he arrived at Eleanor's house and waited for her in a chair, he didn't expect her to come out wearing heavy armor and ask him what his purpose was for coming. Falma was stunned by her attire and quickly clarified that he wasn't there to harm her, but was sent by his father to deliver medicine. Initially, Eleanor had let her guard down, but hearing that he had come to deliver medicine made her anxious again. She could make such cold medicine herself. Why did Falma need to deliver it personally? Could it be poisoned? Seeing how frightened Eleanor was, Falma quickly explained that he was still not very familiar with divine arts and there were no such books at home, so he hoped Eleanor would continue to be his teacher. After speaking, he also presented a bouquet of flowers to show his sincerity. After Falma left, Eleanor was extremely conflicted at home, debating whether to take the medicine Falma had given her, as she had never seen powdered medicine before and was unsure if it was poisoned. She looked at the bouquet of sky blue flowers Falma had given her, her favorite color, and at that moment she made her decision to trust Falma. The next day, Eleanor, once again wearing heavy armor, found Falma to continue teaching him divine arts. The armor wasn't a precaution against Falma but was necessary because the divine arts he used were too powerful, requiring some basic defense. Under Eleanor's guidance, although Falma still couldn't fully control divine arts, he made some progress and could now control the direction of thrown objects. Back at the mansion, Falma used his divine eye to check all the servants, recorded their conditions in a notebook, and then went to the pharmacy to prepare the appropriate medicines for them. With a wave of his hand, glycerin appeared out of thin air, without the need for synthesis. With this ability to create compounds by imagining their structures, Falma felt no pressure in preparing medicines. After finishing, he distributed the medicines to the servants, who were tearfully grateful. Falma was puzzled by their reaction. Charlotte explained that commoners like them are not entitled to see a noble pharmacist, due to class differences, and even if they did, the cost of medicine was prohibitively expensive for them. Walking through the estate with Charlotte, Falma felt deeply troubled by the unfairness of the world, where poor people could not receive proper medical treatment and had to rely on almost mystical folk remedies. Thus, he resolved to ensure that medicines reached those in need. Fama went to the dining room for dinner and noticed his parents' grave expressions and that his sister Blanche was absent. Asking where she was, his father told him that Blanche had contracted chickenpox, a contagious disease requiring isolation for 14 days, and that everyone should avoid her room during this period. However, Fama, a prodigy in modern medicine before his transmigration, was well equipped to treat such ailments. In his previous life, he couldn't save his sister from cancer. This time, he was determined not to let his sister suffer from illness. In the pharmacy, after considering several medicines that were not viable due to their large molecular size, Fama chose acyclovir, which has a smaller molecular weight. After preparing the medicine, he sneaked into his sister's room. Seeing her covered in red spots, he was heartbroken. Using his divine eye, he confirmed the chickenpox infection and offered her the homemade medicine, which she initially refused due to its bitterness. Reluctantly, Fama hid the medicine in a macaron, knowing no girl could resist a pink macaron. After taking the medicine, his sister was puzzled, as their father had once said that chickenpox was incurable. Wondering where Fama's medicine came from, Fama was startled. Realizing he hadn't considered the source of the medicine, he quickly concocted a lie, claiming he saw it in a newly published book his father hadn't yet had time to read, and asked his sister to keep it a secret. Fama then realized that this world lacked the concept of viruses and bacteria due to the absence of observational equipment. A few days later, he built a Leeuwenhoek-style microscope so that Blanche could see bacteria. Before Fama could enjoy his success for long, a servant knocked on the door to inform him that his father wanted to see him. Upon arriving at his father's room, his father didn't say much, only instructing Fama to quickly prepare as they were about to provide emergency treatment for the emperor. Arriving at the emperor's chamber, all the best doctors from across the nation had already gathered there. Falma's father approached the bed to request an audience. When the curtain was drawn, a woman appeared. It was the Empress of the nation. Falma's father took a blood sample, which he then dropped into a test tube and catalyzed with magic. The result came out quickly, but he did not immediately disclose it to the Empress, instead consulting with the soothsayer and the ministers first. The outcome of the divination was also unfavorable, indicating that the stars were not aligned well. Combined with the results from the blood sample, it seemed that the Empress's life would not be long. Falma's father could only say that he would do his best to treat her. He then prepared a bottle of anesthesia, telling the Empress it was a very effective medicine and to inhale the steam produced after heating. Initially, Fama thought this was just a standard palliative treatment to relieve the patient's pain. However, when he overheard the ministers discussing that the following night would be critical and to prepare everyone else, Fama realized they were planning to cease treatment and administer euthanasia to the Empress. Fama could no longer stand idly by. The next second, he used his X-ray vision to examine the Empress's condition. Fama was surprised to find that the Empress had tuberculosis. Without syringes available, he had no choice but to opt for oral medication. Ideally, 4 types of medications were needed, including rifampicin, but it had a large molecular weight and an extremely complex structure, which made it difficult to accurately imagine. If he failed, the Empress would only be euthanized. Then, the Empress's child burst in, running to the Empress's bedside and crying bitterly on her. Seeing this scene, Fama was emotionally conflicted but could not bear to see life and death parting and decided to intervene. He claimed to have a new drug that could effectively treat Her Majesty's illness. His father heard this and told him not to talk nonsense, calling him a half-baked fellow and asking him to step down. The Empress quickly stopped Falma's father, choosing to believe in Fama not because of anything else but because Fama stood up to take on this responsibility when all other pharmacists had given up. In the pharmacy, Fama used ice to seal the door, ignoring his father's shouts from outside. At this moment, Falma's brain was working rapidly to prevent the tuberculosis bacteria from developing resistance. 3 to 4 types of drugs were needed for treatment. Fama was currently making the medications, and the molecular structures gradually became clear. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Falma's father broke down the door. He questioned what Fama was really trying to do, stating that no one in this world could treat the White Plague. Fama was also surprised, not expecting his father to be able to diagnose the Empress with tuberculosis all by himself, as even he needed the divine eye. Falma's father taught him that being a pharmacist was not just about flaunting knowledge but required a true heart to save patients. For someone with an incurable disease like tuberculosis, why give them hope only to push them into the abyss later? Fama quickly explained that he indeed had a treatment, and his father also needed treatment. It turned out that Fama had already observed his father coughing continuously when his sister had chickenpox. After speaking, Fama ignored his father and continued making medicine. His father questioned Fama, "What exactly are you making now? If you can't explain it, Then it must be poison. Fama, feeling helpless, had no choice but to create an ice wall to separate them. This completely shocked Falma's father. Falma's casting didn't require a wand or chanting. He asked Falma who he really was, or if he was still his son Falma. But Falma didn't know how to answer, so he chose to remain silent. Soon, his father noticed a notebook nearby. He flipped through it. Finding it filled with incomprehensible content, he asked Falma what it was. Falma had no choice but to answer. It's knowledge of a new medicine, dreamed up after being struck by lightning. Soon, his father also noticed the sacred mark on Falma's arm. And then he realized his son had been blessed by the god of medicine. With this realization, he no longer hindered Falma from making medicines. Falma quickly finished the medicine and brought it over. Having made a mask himself to prevent contagion, Falma placed the tray on the Empress's bedside table, took up the homemade Leeuwenhoek simple microscope, and a specimen made from the Empress's sputum. He wanted the Empress to see the tuberculosis bacteria for herself. The Empress picked up the microscope and looked at it against the light source, and was thoroughly shocked. She quickly called her subordinates to take a look. One by one, they were equally astounded. This completely overturned their understanding of medicine. The microscope Falma brought out directly challenged the existing concepts of disease. After explaining the cause of tuberculosis, Falma divided the medicine into 2 portions. He took 1 cup himself and handed the other to the Empress. Falma drank his in front of the Empress to prove the medicine was safe. Seeing Falma's boldness, the Empress also downed the medicine in 1 gulp. And over the next half year, Falma came every day to ensure the Empress took her medicine. This was to directly confirm the treatment method, as tuberculosis is extremely stubborn and cannot be cured in a short time. Since Falma created the tuberculosis medicine, half a year had passed, and the Empress's tuberculosis had been completely cured. For this, the Empress even held a special commendation meeting. At the meeting, the Empress awarded Falma's father and granted him a piece of land, raising Falma's status from apprentice pharmacist to court pharmacist, and specially approved Falma to open a pharmacy in the imperial capital. After the meeting and returning home, the architects summoned by the Empress had already been waiting in the room for a long time, and they needed Falma to produce the design immediately. They had to start construction today, or else they would lose their jobs and possibly their lives. Falma reluctantly drew up his ideal pharmacy. With the design ready, the workers quickly started construction, but now they needed Falma to quickly come up with a name, or else it would affect their construction schedule. Falma thought about it. Imperial Capital Pharmacy seemed too grand, and using his family's name didn't seem right either. After much thought, he couldn't come up with a good name, because he never imagined he could actually open a pharmacy in another world. But this murmured remark was overheard by a worker, and thus the name Another World Pharmacy was officially established. However, Falma soon encountered another problem. He and teacher Eleanor were capable of making and selling medicine and greeting customers, but who would handle the finances? At this moment, Charlotte volunteered. She said that she was good at calculating numbers and could read and write, so she should take on this job. Falma immediately frowned and said to Charlotte, "You are only 9 years old. How can you handle finances? Such things should be managed by adults." Charlotte was unhappy and retorted, "Aren't you only 10 years old?" In fact, she didn't really want to do the finances. She was just afraid that Falma, becoming the pharmacy owner, would gradually drift away from her. Hearing this, Falma couldn't help but smile and gently said to Charlotte, "Then you can do some simple tasks in the future. I will not abandon you." Charlotte finally felt relieved. In the evening, when Falma returned home, he was surprised to find his sister and a group of servants crying as soon as he entered the door. He quickly ran up to ask what had happened. It turned out that the chief financial officer at home had been dismissed by his father, and everyone was very reluctant to let him go. The chief financial officer said that he actually still wanted to continue working, but Falma's father had him retire early to rest at home because of an injury on his knee. Hearing this, Falma thought to himself that he was in need of an accountant, so he said to the chief financial officer, "Then come work for me. I will also heal your knee." After saying this, he quickly ran to his father's room to seek his opinion. After listening to Falma's request, his father was unexpectedly calm and only said to Falma, "The chief financial officer is a very reliable accountant, and now that I have dismissed him, I can't control where he works." After speaking, he had his subordinates bring over a box and handed Falma a key to open it himself. Falma opened the box without hesitation and was surprised to find it full of gold coins. His father told Falma that this was a congratulatory gift for his business opening, saying, "How could a father not support his son in opening a pharmacy?" At this moment, Fama realized that the chief financial officer's dismissal was also arranged by his father. Fama had opened the first people's hospital in another world, but the business was very bleak because the commoners were accustomed to visiting well-established civilian pharmacists, while the nobles directly invited pharmacists to their homes. Thus, Falma's Empress-approved pharmacy was awkwardly positioned between the two. Several people sat in the meeting room discussing how to increase customer traffic, but after a long discussion, no conclusion was reached. It should be noted that there were only a few court pharmacists in the entire country, and Fama, being the son of a noble, had a pharmacy that common people dared not enter due to these two identities. Just when they were at a loss, Charlotte walked in. She had conducted a survey among the commoners, asking how they viewed the Another World pharmacy. The most common response was that they found the royal special approval mark very intimidating. The second was that they did not know the etiquette of speaking with nobles and were afraid of being punished for making a mistake. And others were afraid of being dressed inappropriately and intimidated by the guards at the door. The pharmacy owner being a young child was also a major point. But most importantly, Falma's pricing of medicines was negotiable, as he wanted to set prices based on each person's economic situation. This backfired and made the common people think that the prices were very expensive. Although problems were identified, they couldn't be resolved in a short time. Fortunately, since the opening, the store had its first regular customer. He was an elderly man who always bought candies for sea voyages to supplement vitamin C and prevent scurvy. However, Fama was puzzled, wondering if the elderly man still often went to sea at his age. He casually asked, and the elderly man immediately replied that someone was waiting for him outside and then left. Fama felt something was amiss and followed him outside. Just reaching the entrance, he saw the elderly man chatting with several people dressed as merchants. As he was trying to figure out their relationship, a voice interrupted him. Turning around, he saw it was his parents in disguise. Fama was speechless with his parents' antics. Were they dressed like that so he wouldn't recognize them? However, since they were there, Fama decided to show them around the pharmacy to fully understand their son's business. Seeing that the facilities were well equipped, Falma's parents were very satisfied. After the tour, his father asked about the customer flow. Fama awkwardly mentioned that they were still addressing the issue of commoners being afraid to enter the store. At that moment, Falma's mother suggested a plan to first produce cosmetics and make them popular among the nobility. As long as the prices were low, commoners would also rush to buy them. However, Falma's father made a request not to sell whitening powder, as it contains harmful heavy metals like white lead and mercurous chloride. Although the whitening effects were significant, long-term use could severely damage one's health. Falma's father also mentioned that many women were resorting to bloodletting to make their skin appear whiter, and strongly advised Fama against engaging in such practices. While they were chatting, someone rushed in, reporting that their young mistress had fainted and needed a pharmacist urgently. Seeing the emergency, Fama immediately followed them to the carriage. There, he saw that the patient was pale but could still communicate normally, indicating no consciousness impairment. He then used his divine eye to check for any issues, found no apparent problems on her body, but noticed some cuts on her arm. These cuts were professionally made towards the veins, ruling out self-harm. Recalling his father's words, it seemed the young woman had undergone bloodletting for whitening purposes. Upon understanding the issue, Fama had her brought back to the pharmacy and prescribed some medicine to improve her anemia. The chief steward, recognizing the luxurious attire, identified her as the daughter of the prominent businessman Chatilan. Apparently, she had been despised by someone she admired for not being white enough, leading her to undergo excessive bloodletting for whitening, which caused her to faint. Seeing that the girl was also love-struck, Fama advised her not to use whitening powder or undergo bloodletting anymore and to come back in a week to try the latest whitening product. A week quickly passed, and the young lady came to the pharmacy with her friend. Fama had prepared a set of makeup products and taught the young lady how to use them. First, wash the face and apply a moisturizing toner. Then, evenly spread the whitening cream on the face. This whitening cream not only has a whitening effect but also provides sun protection because Fama added titanium dioxide, which effectively blocks ultraviolet rays. Finally, apply the setting powder, which contains cerussite mica, making the skin not only whiter but also shimmery. However, after wearing makeup all day, it is necessary to use a makeup remover that contains skin-repairing ingredients. With continuous maintenance, one can become very fair without using whitening powder. After creating this set of cosmetics, Fama continued to produce many samples and distributed them for free on the streets to the commoners. With low prices and high quality, not only did the cosmetics sell well, but the sales of medicines also increased. However, Problems followed. One day, the young lady came with her friend to buy cosmetics again, and Fama could only awkwardly say that they had sold out because business had been too booming recently, and they couldn't keep up with the demand. At this time, the young lady suggested that Fama separate the cosmetics into a subsidiary company, funded by her, and also hire professional pharmacists. Of course, Fama would still be the boss. After getting a nod from the chief financial officer, Fama gladly accepted the proposal. Soon, the cosmetics store opened, named Butte Medic. Moreover, she hired female pharmacists, which improved the effectiveness of introducing the products. Thus, the first batch of counter sisters in this other world was created. After the pharmacy and cosmetics store were on the right track,